The night was cold and silent in the forest. The moon illuminated the treetops when a faint and almost imperceptible sound echoed among the branches. It was a low, fragile hoot, a cry for help from a defenseless chick. There, in a nest hidden among the leaves, a small owl struggled to survive. The wind swayed the branches, and the mother owl, a majestic and imposing bird, watched her chick with severe eyes. Something was not right. Perhaps he was too weak. Perhaps he was not meant to survive. And then, it happened. Suddenly, without hesitation, the mother pushed the chick out of the nest. The small body fell clumsily, its fragile little bones unprepared for the impact. The tiny owl, so young that its eyes had not yet fully opened, lay there, trembling with fear and cold, rejected by its own mother. Its fate seemed sealed. But against all odds, someone was about to change its story forever. The forest was damp after the previous night's rain, and the scent of wet earth blended with a distant sound of branches swaying in the wind. Emma walked along a narrow trail, holding a flashlight in one hand and a small notebook in the other. As a biologist specializing in birds of prey, she often monitored nests in the region, checking chicks and studying their habits. But that morning, something different caught her attention. In the middle of the trail, almost hidden among fallen leaves, a small figure was trembling. Approaching carefully, Emma knelt and brushed aside the damp leaves. Her heart tightened when she saw an owl chick, so young that its down was still as soft as cotton. It was completely still, but its breathing was weak and irregular. Its tiny claws twitched slightly, as if trying to grasp something that was no longer there. Its eyes were half closed, and a barely audible whimper escaped from its small beak. Emma looked up and identified a nest among the high branches. It was evident this chick had been rejected. She hesitated for a moment. Intervening in nature was always a delicate decision, but leaving that chick there would mean condemning it to certain death. Its mother would not return for it, and it was far too young to survive alone. The dilemma lasted only a few seconds before Emma made her decision. Picking it up as gently as possible, she felt its tiny body tremble against her hands. It was scared, defenseless, and completely alone. Upon arriving home, Emma prepared a small makeshift nest inside a cardboard box lined with soft cloths. She warmed a heating pad to simulate the warmth of the mother's body and placed the chick there, hoping it would recover. She took a syringe with a special nutrient mixture and began feeding it drop by drop. The small beak slowly opened, and to her surprise, it accepted the food. At that moment, Emma knew it had a chance. In the following days, the tiny owl began to gain strength. Its eyes opened completely, revealing an intense and curious gleam. Emma decided to name it Shrek, due to its scruffy appearance and enormous eyes that always seemed to be watching everything around it. But despite the care, she knew there was a problem. Owl chicks learn how to behave from their parents, how to hunt and fly by observing their kind. Shrek had no one. He was growing up in an environment completely different from what he was supposed to. Then something unexpected happened. One day, while Emma was feeding Shrek, a curious snout appeared beside the box. Torque, her elegant greyhound with gentle eyes, silently approached, sniffing the tiny bird with interest. Shrek shrank for a moment, startled by the size of the animal before him. But to Emma's surprise, Torque showed no aggression. Quite the opposite. He lay down beside the box and stayed there, watching, as if to say, "Don't be afraid, little one. I am here." Emma smiled, unaware that this would be only the first step toward the most unlikely friendship she had ever witnessed. Shrek was growing stronger. His eyes, once half-closed and dull, now gleamed with curiosity. His small wings, though still fragile, were already attempting their first movements. Emma felt proud to see his progress, but a concern lingered in her mind. He was growing up far from others of his kind. There was no mother to teach him how to be an owl. Nature had denied him that learning. And as much as Emma tried to make up for that absence, she knew that her role had its limits. Then, one morning, while she was preparing Shrek's food, a long and attentive snout appeared beside the box. Torque, her elegant short-haired greyhound with expressive eyes, observed the little bird with a mix of curiosity and caution. Shrek, in turn, instinctively shrank back, pressing his body against the corner of the box. For such a small chick, the presence of that large, unfamiliar dog seemed terrifying. Emma held her breath, ready to intervene if necessary. But to her surprise, Torque did nothing but lie down beside the box. He remained still, as if waiting for the tiny owl's permission to get closer. Shrek, still wary, widened his eyes and let out a soft hoot, almost a whisper. Torque tilted his head, curious, but did not insist. He just stayed there, as if saying, "I am not a threat. I'm just waiting for you to trust me." That night, Torque stayed close to Shrek's box, lying on the floor like a true guardian. Emma realized he was not there out of mere curiosity. There was something different. Torque had never shown such interest in any other animal before, and now he seemed determined to protect this tiny, fragile creature. When Emma lay down to sleep, she noticed that Torque remained vigilant. From time to time, he would look into the box, making sure his new friend was all right. The next day, Shrek showed his first sign of trust. When Emma took the chick out of the box to feed him, Torque approached and, with an extremely gentle movement, touched his snout to the tiny feathered body. This time, Shrek did not shrink back. On the contrary, he blinked slowly, accepting the dog's touch. It was a brief moment, but full of meaning. Emma smiled. That was the first step in an unlikely friendship that would change both of their lives forever. From that day on, Torque began following Shrek's every move. When the owl tried to open his wings to balance, Torque watched closely, as if cheering him on. When Shrek hooted, Torque responded with an attentive gaze and a small lick in the air, as if to say, "I'm here." Slowly, the barrier between them dissolved. And without anyone realizing it, what started as mere curiosity turned into something much greater. Shrek had lost his mother at the beginning of his life, but maybe, just maybe, fate had given him a brother instead. Time passed, and Shrek was no longer the fragile, defenseless chick Emma had rescued from the forest. His feathers began to grow, forming a beautiful gray mantle with white spots. His eyes, once dull with exhaustion, were now two golden spheres full of life. The little owl started exploring his surroundings with more confidence, hopping out of the box and clumsily walking across the floor. But no matter what he did, Torque was always close by, watching every step like a true older brother. The bond between them became something Emma never imagined witnessing. Whenever Shrek tried flapping his wings, Torque wagged his tail, as if encouraging him to keep going. When the owl stumbled and fell, the greyhound would approach, gently nudging him with his snout, urging him to try again. At night, when the cold settled in the house, Shrek would nestle between Torque's paws, warmed by his friend's body heat. And, curiously, Torque seemed to enjoy it. He never pushed the owl away, he would just sigh softly and let him sleep there, as if he knew that this tiny creature needed him. But their friendship went beyond warmth and protection. They began to develop a unique way of communicating. When he was hungry, Shrek would let out a specific hoot, and Torque would run to Emma, as if asking her to feed his friend. When the dog wanted to play, he would gently nudge Shrek with his snout, and the owl would respond by lightly pecking the tip of his ear. It was a language of their own, a connection so natural that it seemed to defy any logical explanation. One of the most remarkable moments for Emma happened on a sunny day when she decided to let Shrek and Torque enjoy the outdoors in the backyard. Shrek, who had never ventured too far before, decided to test his wings. He climbed onto Torque's back, and to Emma's surprise, the dog remained still, as if he understood that he was about to witness something special. Then, with a small push, Shrek spread his wings and glided for a few seconds before landing on the grass. Torque ran up to him, wagging his tail and spinning in circles, as if celebrating his friend's achievement. Emma was deeply moved by what she saw. The dog seemed prouder of Shrek than any other animal could ever be. As the months passed, Shrek began spending more time outdoors. His wings grew stronger, and he could now fly short distances. But no matter how much freedom called to him, one thing never changed. Every night, he returned to Torque. While other owls his age would be learning to hunt on their own in the forest, Shrek preferred to land beside his four-legged friend and sleep peacefully there, feeling safe. Emma knew that their bond was unique. Torque and Shrek had found in each other something no one else could offer, a true, unbreakable connection. A love that defied all the expectations of nature. But even with this extraordinary friendship, Emma also knew that nature would take its course. And soon, the moment would come when Shrek would have to choose between the life he was destined for and the family he had unexpectedly found. Emma knew that day would come, but she never imagined it would be so painful. Shrek had grown, strong and ready to live in the wild. His wings, now fully developed, allowed him to fly with ease. He had begun to show wild instincts, watching small insects in the yard and trying to hunt them. It was a clear sign that he needed to follow his path. Emma spent sleepless nights pondering the decision. Keeping him there, safe, beside Torque, would be selfish. But letting him go meant breaking the most beautiful bond she had ever witnessed. Torque seemed to sense that something was different. In the past few days, he had been restless, following Shrek everywhere. When the owl flew to a higher branch, Torque would sit below, watching him with a look that mixed pride and fear. It was as if he knew that at any moment, Shrek might not come back. That night, Emma made her decision. The next day, she would take Shrek to a nature reserve, where he would have the chance to integrate into his true home. She wanted to believe it was the best thing for him, but her heart felt heavy at the thought of Torque without his inseparable friend. The next morning, Emma carefully prepared the carrier. Shrek entered without resistance, but his gaze seemed confused. Torque, on the other hand, reacted unexpectedly. When Emma picked up the box, he began to whimper and follow her every step. In the car, he refused to lie down and kept his eyes fixed on the box, breathing quickly, as if trying to understand what was happening. Emma had to swallow the emotion rising inside her. This goodbye was not only difficult for her, it was devastating for Torque. When they arrived at the reserve, Emma opened the box with trembling hands. Shrek remained still for a moment, his eyes meeting Torque's. A deep silence settled in. Emma watched, her heart tight, waiting for Shrek to fly. And then he did. With a strong flap of his wings, he soared into the open sky, quickly gaining altitude. Torque took a small step forward, as if he wanted to follow him. But there was nothing he could do. He just stood there, looking up, watching his best friend disappear among the trees. The silence was broken by a heavy sigh from Torque, who lowered his head and slowly turned around. Emma felt a lump in her throat. Torque didn't whimper, didn't resist. He just accepted it. Maybe he understood, in some way, that Shrek never truly belonged there. But that didn't make the goodbye any less painful. Emma ran her hand gently over Torque's head, trying to comfort him. "He will always remember you," she whispered. But deep down, she wondered if that was true. Had Shrek left forever? Or would that bond, which seemed unbreakable, still have one last chapter? Days passed in silence. Torque no longer ran around the yard like before. His eyes, once so bright and alert, now seemed lost in quiet sadness. He still looked up at the sky every night, as if hoping to see Shrek's silhouette against the moonlight. But time went on, and the owl did not return. Emma feared that Torque would never be the same again. No matter how much she tried to distract him with games and walks, the dog seemed incomplete. After all, how do you explain to such a pure heart that some goodbyes are forever? Until, one night, something unexpected happened. Emma was closing the windows when she heard a familiar sound coming from the yard. A soft hoot, almost a whisper in the darkness. Her heart raced. She ran outside, feeling the cold wind against her face, and stopped abruptly at what stood before her. At the top of the wall, illuminated by the yellow glow of the streetlight, a small owl was watching them. Its eyes shone like liquid gold. Emma could hardly believe it. It was Shrek. Torque heard it too. His entire body stiffened before he lifted his head and sniffed the air. He froze for a second, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. But when Shrek flapped his wings and flew toward him, landing gently on his back, the dog didn't hesitate. His tail began to wag frantically, and he let out a small whimper, a sound filled with happiness and relief. Shrek, in turn, lightly pecked Torque's ear, the same gesture he always made when he wanted to play. It was as if nothing had changed, as if he had never left. Emma felt her eyes well up. Against all odds, Shrek had found his way back home. But now, he was no longer a helpless chick. He was a free, wild owl. And yet, he still chose to return to the friend who had never abandoned him. In that moment, Emma realized something powerful. True friendship is not measured by proximity but by the connection that remains, regardless of time or distance. From that night on, Shrek began visiting Torque regularly. During the day, he explored the forest, hunted, lived as the owl he was born to be. But when night fell, he always returned. He always landed on the wall, always let out a soft hoot to let them know he was there. And Torque, without failing a single day, ran to meet him with the same joy as always. Because some friendships defy logic, overcome barriers, and ignore the rules of nature. And in the end, it doesn't matter if one has wings and the other has paws. What truly matters is that they chose to be family. Torque and Shrek continued to see each other always. During the day, Shrek explored the wild. But at night, he always returned to the backyard, to rest beside his best friend. An owl and a dog. A friendship no one would believe, but one that proved a simple truth. True love knows no barriers. And maybe, in the end, family is not just the one we are born into, but the one we choose.